Hello, and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, December 31st. Hopefully, everybody's having a good day so far today. It is New Year's Eve, and we've got another episode for you on this podcast, episode 460 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. Another day and some more Jets news to discuss. I want to get into some comments made by DJ Reed, basically saying that he wants to get out of here. He cannot wait to hit free agency and find another team. And he is saying all of that with still one game left to be played here in a miserable 2024 season for the New York Jets. I also want to talk about the Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers situation, some reports coming out over the last couple of days about their relationship and the potential of a Garrett Wilson trade request, and how that factors into how Rodgers' future factors into a potential Garrett Wilson trade request, his future. Just a complicated situation, really just a complicated mess when it comes to this organization at this moment. As, of course, amidst all of this, they try and find their new head coach and new general managers as interviews continue to ramp up here with just one game left coming up this Sunday out at MetLife Stadium. As always, before we begin, we got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sports book. If you want to get on the betting action of any of the NFL games, college football playoff, NBA, NHL, you know the drill. Check out BetUS. Click my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. Are you looking to get out to MetLife Stadium on Sunday for one more time this season? SeatGeek is an awesome place, and if it's your first time using SeatGeek, whatever the ticket number is, subtract $20 from that when you use my promo code Bubs on Sports for $20 off your first purchase. And you know, it's not just the Jets, it's not just sports, it's anything in entertainment, plays, concerts, shows, you name it. If there's a ticket for an event, SeatGeek has it. $20 off with code Bubs on Sports off your first purchase. And of course, our friends over at Huga House. You want to get your hands on any of their awesome selection of hats, use promo code Bubs for 15% off any purchase. And when you use my promo code, that's 15% off on the first hat and then 30% off on the second hat. So definitely check them out and get yourself some swag. All right, here we go. Episode 460, the final episode of 2024. Midnight tonight, the ball will drop down and it'll be 2025, and it'll be another year and another big offseason that'll ultimately begin here for this New York Jets franchise as they search for a new regime and try and search and find themselves out of this 14-year playoff drought that they're currently entrenched in what is another just awful season on so many levels. So we'll see what 2025 has in store for this team. But today I want to get to some different things. I want to start with DJ Reed. So obviously post-game against the Bills, spoke to some media members, and Tyler Dunn had an article out today, or yesterday rather, last night had an article out about some comments made by DJ Reed. And they were some alarming comments. There were some alarming quotes. One quote specifically, basically saying that he wants to leave and he can't wait for this season to be over with, and basically saying he's not coming back. Now, that's not much of a surprise, but the fact that it's happening while there's still a game left to be played, and I think the fact that these comments are coming out and players are saying things like this, I think tell you all you need to know about the state of the Jets locker room and the state of this franchise. So I'll pull the full quote, the full interaction up here on the screen. So after losing 40-14 to the Buffalo Bills, a season officially capsized, cornerback DJ Reed thought back to what ran through his mind when the Jets were 0-0 instead of 4-12. He said, quote, "I was going to have 10 picks. We were going to be elite. I thought that we'd be up in the score late in games and teams would have to throw the ball, and I'm going to make plays on the ball. A utopia that never transpired, at any point. Instead, players cannot shelve their Jets gear fast enough. Asked if he wants to be around next season, Reed shakes his head. I'm ready to go to free agency, bro. I'm ready to see what's next for me. That last line, I'll read it again. I'm ready to go to free agency, bro. I'm ready to see what's next for me, is really the biggest takeaway there. And also the first quote as well. I mean, a lot of us, myself included, thought the Jets would be leading in a lot of these games, thought that this Jets defense would still be good enough, would still be one of the better defenses in the NFL, where they could capitalize on more turnovers. They could take advantage late in games. Teams would be forced to pass late in games, which could open up more interception opportunities for guys like DJ Reed, for guys like Sauce Gardner, heck, even the safeties as well. And that's been the complete opposite. I mean, the New York Jets this year, you talk about a team, they are allergic to interceptions. They have just 5 interceptions as a team this year. 2 of them have come from safeties. 1 of them came from Sauce Gardner on a complete overthrow from Mac Jones in that Jaguars game to end it. And the other 2 of the 5 came from Brandon Echols, who's a backup cornerback. So DJ Reed, all these other guys, they have not gotten their hands on any interceptions. Michael Carter, who's been in and out of the lineup this year with injuries, hasn't gotten his hand on an interception. So that part is definitely true. They haven't had opportunities late in games to play with leads. There's been a couple times that they've had played with leads, but there's also been other times where they've been down. Offense, it's been a mess, right? It's been a mess both sides of the ball. The offense has had games where they've messed up late. The defense has had games where they've messed up late. There's been games where the kicking, the coaching, there's been a multiple. There could be, to paraphrase Saleh, there could be a whole receipt list of reasons why this team is 4-12 right now and potentially 4-13 once the clock hits triple zeros on Sunday against the Dolphins. But I think that quote, I'm ready for what's next. This quote right here, I'm ready to go to free agency, bro. I'm ready to see what's next for me. It describes this locker room. This locker room's broken. It's a losing culture. You've got a bunch of guys that don't want to be here. You've got a bunch of guys that have quit. And I think DJ Reed is kind of the perfect example of a guy that has kind of quit as the season has gone on, because this was a guy that you look at his numbers pre-Robert Saleh, and then you look at his numbers post-Robert Saleh, they are alarming in many ways. It feels like a guy that everything that was going on early in the season, they fired Robert Saleh, clearly didn't have much of a belief in Jeff Ulbrich, clearly didn't have much of a belief in the way the organization was going, kind of quit on the team, kind of quit, gave up, and said, I'm done. Because you look at some of these numbers, he had a strong start. Early in the year, right, Sauce was having some struggles. DJ Reed was the one of the consistents. He was like the Jets' best corner through the first couple weeks of the season. You look at his numbers as a whole this season, right? 10 passes defended, 13 games played, has missed some time, 59 total tackles. You look at those passes defended, I think this is one of the most alarming numbers. Now, he did miss the Titans game, but in his first 4 games played of the season, 4 to the Jets' first 5 games, with Robert Saleh, DJ Reed had 6 passes defended in his first 4 games. You fast forward to the last 9 games post Robert Saleh, he's had just 4 passes defended. That is a major, major drop-off. And I think one of the most alarming aspects of it all, too, is the fact that the penalties have gone up a very large amount from earlier in the year. This was never a guy that took a ton of penalties throughout his Jet tenure, but recently it has. And a lot of times penalties, especially for corners at times, for a guy like DJ Reed in this situation, oftentimes signals laziness, stuff like that, where you're grabbing a little bit, you're not going out there and putting 100% effort, you fall behind the play, and then you try and make up for it, and you get penalized for it with a PI or a holding or whatever. I mean, Sunday was not good at all. Took a couple penalties, was a big part of the 16 penalty performance for this Jet team. Of course, allowed 1 touchdown. I believe that was the play to Mac Hollins, where he was basically chasing him, or maybe it was the Keon Coleman touchdown where he jumped over Quincy. I forget. It might have been Keon Coleman, but he was chasing him. He then jumps over Quincy Williams, who tried to grab it. Keon Coleman, just the bigger receiver, went up and got it. He hasn't looked good, and he's quit. He's quit. And I think his quote kind of shows you where this locker room's at. And I'm just so sick of a Jet fan, and I'm sure Jets fans as a whole are sick of hearing this from guys, seeing this type of play from guys, seeing a team quit year in and year out, seeing this losing culture continue to last year in and year out. And I will continue to harp on this until the head coach is hired and we start to see success. This is another reason why this next hire is so important. This franchise, this locker room has never been in a worse spot than it is now. The worst, this is as bad as it was after the Kotite years. That's how low this franchise is right now. And they went out and got Parcells. This organization needs a major kick in the rear end. They need to do a complete 180 because this is simply unacceptable. Guys quitting, guys saying this with a game left in the year. I mean, let's be honest, do you really blame him? I'm sure there's some fans that are like, do you even blame the guy if he wants out? I mean, he has a chance to go get paid elsewhere. And let's be honest here, we all knew DJ Reed was probably not going to come back next season but it's the way he's leaving now, right? He's basically quit. He's looking ahead to next year already. He's, packing his bags. He's done. With 3 years here, he's been very good. He's been a very solid pickup. He was one of Joe D's better free agent signings, which is saying something because Joe Douglas was awful in free agency. I mean, awful. Had a lot of struggles in free agency. DJ Reed was one of the guys that he brought in, right, 2022. He's been very good. He's been one of Joe Douglas's only free agent moves that has actually worked. And I think you'll look back on DJ Reed's tenure as a whole, reflect on it, and be mostly positive about it. But just the way it's ending is ugly. And that's why you need a guy to come in here, clean up this culture. Enough of this nonsense, these post-game quotes, just everything. They need to just clear everything out. Like none of this quote stuff, looking at the next year, talking about all this, trade requests, rumors and all that nonsense. None of that. No more bombshell reports. Get all that outside nonsense away from the organization. Enough of the social media stuff too, because the social media stuff's gone out of hand. I mean, DJ Reed was even a guy that a couple weeks ago when he posted on social media about the refs, like that's not necessary. You got Breece Hall saying hashtag free 20. You've got Sauce saying some stuff on social media just recently with T. Higgins replying to him and then having to clear it up. Like clear all of that out. Clear it out and just focus on football and focus on building a winning culture. It's a country club environment. It's do whatever the heck you want and go play football on Sundays. What you do on Monday through Saturday, do whatever the heck you want. Come out Sunday and just get destroyed. That can't happen. That can't happen. It's inexcusable. This is another example of it. So, and again, we knew DJ Reed wouldn't come back, but it's the way now he's leaving that's just ugly. The Jets had a choice to make. It was either going to be pay DJ Reed or pay Michael Carter. That was the big choice. They decided to pay Michael Carter. DJ Reed is going to want cornerback one money elsewhere, and he wasn't going to get it here. Even if they didn't pay Michael Carter, they probably still wouldn't have brought him back because then down the road, if they do eventually pay Sauce, you couldn't be able to pay DJ Reed number 1 corner money and then pay Sauce number 1 corner money. You just couldn't do it. So, one more game left for DJ Reed. I'm very interested if they're going to ask Ulbrich tomorrow on this, and if they will, Ulbrich will probably be scrambling because he's a dead man walking up at the podium right now. I mean, he's so broken. I mean, yesterday he called Hassan Reddick unselfish, which is just so crazy that you call a guy unselfish when he missed the first 7 games, all of training camp because of a contract. If that's unselfish, then maybe I'm just, I don't know. Maybe I'm living in a different world then. So that's the DJ Reed situation. Now let's get into Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, the Garrett Wilson stuff's now been going on for a couple weeks. I think the last 2 weeks, it's really started to ramp up. Number one, the season's almost over. And let's be honest, a lot of people, the reporters, some of these people, they need to talk about other stuff other than just coaching and GM. Because we could sit here all day and talk about the next head coach, next GM, all that stuff. We could sit here all day and kill Ulbrich. We could do all that. But we all know, the next head coach, GM's important. We all know Ulbrich's a dead man walking. So you try and find other stories. And that's where Garrett Wilson has kind of popped up a lot here over the last couple weeks. And it's really started to ramp up because of that. You also had the whole Rich Cimini podcast that said people close to him feel like he's going to request a trade. Then you got Garrett Wilson himself that week when he spoke to the media, said that, he doesn't know what his future is. He's, he gave the age-old, I'm where my feet are and I'm focused on this right now. I don't, they asked him, do you want to be here long-term? He's like, I don't know. I'm not focused on that, all that stuff. And then now you got some reports from an NFL Network, Ian Rappaport, about the relationship between him and Rodgers and how it potentially is a lot worse than maybe some make it out to be, or at least a lot worse than it seems on the surface. And a lot of Garrett Wilson's frustration have stemmed from targets. And I think also a lot of it has stemmed from he's just sick and tired of losing. I mean, he sat through his just think about this. Garrett Wilson, all these guys, this 2022 draft class as a whole, they sat through 2022 when the team was 7-4. They lost 6 straight games. Then last year, they sat through a year where they saw the team basically give up. The organization gave up 4 snaps in. They gave up. They made no real attempt to bring in a competent backup quarterback. They said Rodgers is down. Everyone gets a pass for this year. We're going to run it back in 2024. So last year was a lost season from the start. And then this year, your coach gets fired, GM gets fired, quarterback's not playing up to expectations, and you're going to finish 4-13 or 5-12. You're not even going to sniff the playoffs. And you're playing in, again, a meaningless games down the stretch in December. So that's a lot of where the frustration stems from. But some more of it potentially seems like it's coming from the targets, which we know, and maybe Aaron Rodgers and that connection. Here was Ian Rappaport on Sunday morning, NFL Network, talking about the relationship between the two and the effect it maybe has on Garrett Wilson's future and the Jets maybe having to pick between the two of them.
Is Garrett Wilson, their star receiver, still in their future, or potentially could he end up asking for a trade? Here's why I mentioned that. Garrett Wilson made some news this week expressing frustration about his role in the offense. Of course, he has not clicked, despite a ton of targets, has not clicked with Aaron Rodgers. There was a well-publicized spat with Rodgers in training camp. There was the trade for Davante Adams, which he was for, but basically took him from a number 1 receiver to a number 2 receiver. There's been plenty of times he has been open, wondering why has Rodgers not gotten him the ball. If Aaron Rodgers is back with the Jets, it is a real question. Will Garrett Wilson be back as well?
So that last part there, if Aaron Rodgers is back, it is a real question if Garrett Wilson would be back as well. And there was also an article on this on NFL Network that went a little bit more into basically if Rodgers is back, there's a good chance that is going to be Garrett Wilson. That's going to stem Garrett Wilson to request a trade. If Rodgers is not back and they get the right coach, maybe Wilson's more open to returning. Again, I don't think Garrett's going to get traded. I think the Jets would be stupid to trade him. The Jets have team control. Garrett has no leverage in this situation. They've got control over him for the next, I believe, 3 or even 4 years. I mean, they've got obviously 2 more years on his rookie deal, or another year rather on his rookie deal, because it's already year 3. And then you've got the 5th year option because he's a first round pick, and you'll have franchise tags. So he does not have much room right now to maneuver. And at the end of the day, if the Jets, if they hired the right coach and he sees, let's say, Vrabel's vision, just throwing him out there because he's a top candidate. He's my top candidate, right? You get Vrabel, that would be the ideal situation. Garrett Wilson buys in, likes that hire, and then they offer him and say, hey, we want you a part of our plan. You are going to be a key piece for us moving forward. And they give him a huge contract extension. I think he'll stay here. But it is interesting, the whole Garrett Wilson thing. And it did talk about just the whole Aaron Rodgers thing, rather, going into this as well. Like they did talk about in this article that some of those training camp blowups, they had, a little bit during camp, it started to have a disconnect, which I think could be thrown a little bit out of proportion because early in the season, prior to Davante Adams, Garrett was getting targeted a lot, and he was a big factor. And now he's not. Now he's really a secondary option. That's the big thing. A lot of people look at Garrett's targets and say to themselves, he's got 100 and 49 targets this year in the NFL. That's fourth in the NFL. And everybody's like, oh, why is he upset about targets? He's fourth in the NFL. And Steve Gelbs did a really, really good segment on the Jets pregame show on Sunday before the Bills game, breaking down, the old saying that stats don't lie, but sometimes stats without context can lie. And if you put more context and more research into the whole Garrett Wilson target thing, it's ugly when you look at post Davante Adams trade, how he's been utilized. He has been a number 2 receiver post Davante Adams trade. And that's what I've said a lot about Aaron Rodgers. And I've said that a lot about this team right now. You watch this team on Sundays, and it is legitimately turned into whatever the heck Aaron Rodgers wants to do. It's just an Aaron Rodgers show. Like, if he wants to force feed it to Davante Adams 10 times, he's going to do it. Right? We saw it against the Rams. He was force feeding Davante to try and get his 500th touchdown. And a lot of people will look at the box score and say, oh, well, Garrett had 7 targets that game, or I think it was 7 targets. Yeah, he had 3 the first 55 minutes of the game. The rest of them came in garbage time when the team was down. And also another thing to throw out there, and what Steve Gelbs brought up as well, was a lot of Garrett's targets have come either late in the game, like garbage time, like that Rams game, or on the first 2 drives where they get him involved. And then once the scripted plays are over, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, where then it's like the Aaron Rodgers show, and he just forces it to his, Davante. He forces it to Lazard, which you want to throw it to Davante, fine. I can understand that. But forcing Al Lazard 7 to 8 targets, throwing him the ball on 3rd down is blasphemous. He shouldn't even be playing. At most, Lazard should be getting a target or 2 a game. At most. He should not be getting 7 targets. Those should be going to Garrett Wilson. But that's what it turns into after the scripted plays. Or when the game's over, then he's like, oh, let's give the ball to Garrett Wilson. And you look at his whole body of work. Yeah, 149 targets on the season. That's 4th. But a lot of those came from the first 6 games of the season. First 6 games of the season before the Jets traded for Davante Adams. You look at post Davante Adams trade, Garrett Wilson's targets from week 7 to 17. He went into this weekend's game against the Bills tied for 17th in receptions, or tied for 17th in targets since week 7. He now, after Buffalo, now has 82 targets. And then from week 10 to 17, he went into this week tied for 30th in targets. Post this game, he's at 55 targets. So he's bottom of the NFL, second bottom half of the NFL, like he's behind top 15 in the NFL in targets since Davante Adams has come here. And that's why context is key. Because since Davante's come here, especially recently, he has been utilized as a number 2 receiver. Heck, even times a number 3 when Rodgers is forcing it to Lazard for some dumb reason, like he did on Sunday on that 3rd and 19 play. So that's why Garrett's frustrated. He's sick and tired of running wide open. Yeah, overall, his whole body of work, it's a lot of targets. But when you break it down, he's been utilized as a number 2 for the majority of the season. And that's unacceptable. And it's simple as this. There's not really much to say from the Aaron Rodgers side of things here. It is simple as this. And I've said this. The next GM and next head coach should be in charge of the Aaron Rodgers decision. They should be. If they want Rodgers back, then they bring him back. If they don't, then you don't bring him back. It should be the football people making the football decisions. Woody Johnson, who does not get along with Rodgers, that's kind of become public now. Suppose he doesn't want him back. He should not be making the decision. Defer that to the football people. And I have doubts that anybody would want to come in here and inherit Rodgers, but we'll see. But it's simple as this. And the next head coach and next GM, if they're smart, would go along with this plan as well. your kind of biggest takeaway from this article, this report, is the Jets are going to have to make a decision between Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. They're either going to have to bring Aaron Rodgers back with the risk of Garrett requesting a trade and becoming unhappy, or you're going to move on from Rodgers but hold on to Garrett, and maybe with a new coaching staff, a new quarterback, being legitimate number one, all that stuff, a true vision that he can trust from a coaching perspective, he stays here long term. Out of that decision, 100 out of 100 times you go with the star wide receiver. There is no debate. There is no debate. You go with the soon to be, or you go with the 25-year-old wide receiver, 24 right now, but will be 25 by week 1 of 2025, as opposed to the 41-year-old quarterback who will be 42 of December of next year, another year removed from the torn Achilles, who looks like a shell of himself with a major cap hit. You go with Garrett Wilson 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 times, if that's the decision you have to make. If you have to make a decision between Aaron Rodgers or Garrett Wilson, Rodgers can go. Garrett needs to stay. You show Rodgers the door immediately. That's what it's come down to. It's where we're at. So that's the whole Garrett and Rodgers situation. Definitely feels like there might be problems brewing. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, where the state of this team's at, where this organization's at, where this locker room's at, I wouldn't be shocked if there is a rift between the two of them. Because you know how it is with Rodgers. It's his way or the highway. And you've got a guy in Garrett Wilson that is one of the most passionate players who cares a ton in terms of winning and all that stuff. Rodgers at this point, it's let me get my 500 touchdowns. Let me go, record documentaries, all that stuff, all that nonsense. So you just got to hope as a Jet fan, you get this hire right. Garrett's here long-term. Coach makes a decision on Rodgers, which most likely means he's not coming back. And if you choose between the two of them, anybody in their right mind that knows a lick about football, you go with Garrett Wilson long-term. If that's what it takes to keep him here, as opposed to things getting ugly with a potential trade request. Because look, even if you have team control over him, but anytime a player requests a trade, look, it's just an ugly situation. It's not a good look. And it's not something that you want. Like a new GM, a new head coach, it would not be good if they walk into here and, early on in the offseason, you get Garrett requesting a trade. Boom. First month of this regime, you've got to figure out and work out a disgruntled wide receiver. Like, you just don't want that. So if what it takes to bring him back is if the relationship between him and Rodgers is so toxic and you have to make a choice between them, and if he trusts the vision of his coaching staff, you roll with Garrett Wilson. There's no debate. No debate. So let me know what you think about the comments about this in the comments section down below. DJ Reed's comments basically saying, I'm done. I'm going to leave free agency. And then, of course, the problems or the supposed problems between Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. Tomorrow, I plan on getting up a New Year's resolutions video I do every year. For the last couple years of this podcast, I've done, or every year of this podcast, I've done New Year's resolutions. So I did last year, I think did 5. The year before, I think I might have done 5 too. I don't know. Usually it's like 5 New Year's resolutions. So it's basically, everyone's got their New Year's resolutions. 5 things the Jets need to do in 2025 to get this team back on track in 2025. So that's what I'll do tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Enjoy the rest of your New Year's Eve. Enjoy New Year's Day. We'll be back tomorrow and then continue to count down the days before this nightmare of a season is finally over. And we can just look ahead and really get this coaching and general manager search up and running, because next week you'll get Black Monday, and then boom, Tuesday you'll get a ton of interview requests. You're going to start. It's going to, 2-week process. I actually looked today. The Jets, when they hired Saleh, was January 14th. It was that Thursday, January 14th. I believe it was a Thursday. January 14th, 2021 is when they hired Saleh. And now they rushed Gaze. Gaze was much, I believe Gaze was much earlier. They hired Gaze January 11th, so a couple days earlier. But they hired Gaze January 11th, 2019. Then they hired Solid January 14th, 2019. So typical that middle January range. Not that this is news to anybody, but that middle January range is typically your head coach hiring. So really, season ends and boom, 2 weeks. You're going to have a good idea and eventually know very soon who that head coach and GM is. So that'll do it. Stay tuned. Lots of content coming your way. Till next time, JETS, 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 Jets.